The earth trembled as Tabitha Sinclair placed the last shovel of dirt over her husband's grave, her tears falling like rain upon the freshly turned soil. The year was 1875, and the harsh Wyoming Territory had claimed another victim, her beloved Daniel, dead at 33 from pneumonia after a brutal winter. The small town of Clearwater lay just beyond the ridge, but here, in the makeshift cemetery on the outskirts, Tabitha felt utterly alone. Her legs gave way beneath her, the weight of her grief too heavy to bear. She fell to her knees in the mud, her black mourning dress splaying around her, her hands clutching at the earth as if she could somehow reach through it and touch him one more time. 6 years of marriage gone in an instant, and now she was alone with a struggling ranch and nothing but memories. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking, "how am I supposed to do this without you?" She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats, didn't notice the tall figure dismounting and approaching until a shadow fell across her. Startled, she looked up through tear-blurred eyes to see a man she didn't recognize, tall and lean, with a weathered face and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes were trail-worn, and the silver star pinned to his vest caught the afternoon sunlight. He knelt beside her in the mud, seemingly unconcerned about soiling his denims. For a long moment he said nothing, just shared her silence as she wept. Then, with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance, he placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "I'll carry you," he whispered, his voice low and steady. "Not just now, but for as long as you need." Tabitha looked up, confused through her grief. "I don't even know you." "Isaac Forrester," he said simply. "New marshal in Clearwater. Your neighbor Mrs. Holloway mentioned you might need some assistance today." He gestured toward the grave. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam." "Thank you," she managed, attempting to gather herself, suddenly aware of how she must appear disheveled, tear-stained, broken. "But I don't need everyone needs help sometimes, Mrs. Sinclair," he said, rising to his feet and offering his hand. "Even the strongest among us." Tabitha hesitated before placing her gloved hand in his. His grip was firm as he helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed slightly. "My horse is just over there," he said, nodding toward a magnificent chestnut stallion grazing nearby. "Let me take you back to town." "The ranch," she corrected automatically. "I need to go home." Isaac nodded, studying her face. "When did you last eat, Mrs. Sinclair?" The question caught her off guard. She couldn't remember. The days since Daniel's death had blurred together in a haze of arrangements and tears. "I thought as much," he said, not unkindly. "Let's get you home, and I'll see about getting some food into you." Before she could protest, he was guiding her toward his horse with a gentle but firm hand at her elbow. When they reached the animal, he turned to her. "May I?" he asked, his hands poised to help her mount. She nodded mutely, too exhausted to argue. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her easily onto the saddle, then swung up behind her in one fluid motion. His arms came around her to take the reins, creating a secure circle that felt both foreign and oddly comforting. As they rode away from the gravesite, Tabitha kept her eyes forward, unable to look back. The sound of the horse's hooves seemed to echo the words the marshal had whispered to her. "I'll carry you. I'll carry you." She didn't know then how prophetic those words would prove to be. The Sinclair Ranch came into view as they crested the final hill, a modest homestead with a 2-story farmhouse, a barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the pastures, and a small vegetable garden struggled against the Wyoming elements near the house. It wasn't grand, but it had been theirs, hers and Daniel's. Now it was just hers, a widow at 28. "It's a fine place," Isaac commented as they approached. "You've put in good work here." "Daniel did," she replied, her voice hollow. "He built most of it himself." Isaac didn't respond immediately, just guided his horse toward the hitching post in front of the house. Once there, he dismounted and reached up to help her down, his hands steady and strong. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said as her feet touched the ground, "I don't mean to impose, but I'd like to make sure you're settled before I head back to town." Tabitha straightened her back, summoning what little strength remained. "Marshal Forrester, I appreciate your kindness, but I've been managing this ranch alongside my husband for years. I can manage it alone." Something flickered across his face, respect, perhaps. I don't doubt your capabilities, madam, but no one should be alone on the day they bury their spouse. The simple truth of his words broke through her defenses. She nodded once, then led the way to the house. Inside, the emptiness of the home struck her anew. Daniel's hat still hung by the door, his boots stood beneath it, as if waiting for him to return. Isaac removed his own hat as he entered, revealing thick brown hair with a slight curl to it. "Sit," he instructed gently, nodding toward the kitchen table. "I'll see what's in your pantry." Too tired to argue, Tabitha sank into a chair and watched as the marshal moved efficiently around her kitchen, finding coffee, beans, and some cornmeal. Within minutes, he had a pot of coffee brewing and was stirring a pan of beans. "Where did you learn to cook?" she asked, breaking the silence. 10 years on my own," he replied, not looking up from his task. "A man either learns to cook or starves. 10 years as a marshal," he shook his head. "No, madam, 4 as a marshal. Before that, I rode with the cavalry, and before that—" He paused, something unreadable crossing his features. "Before that, I was just trying to find my way, like most young men." Tabitha studied him, noting the lines around his eyes that suggested he was in his mid-30s, perhaps a few years older than Daniel had been. There was something in his manner that spoke of experience beyond his years, a quietness, a watchfulness. "How long have you been in Clearwater?" she asked as he placed a steaming cup of coffee before her. 3 weeks, he answered. "Came up from Colorado when I heard they needed a new marshal." He returned to the stove, spooning beans onto a plate. "This town's growing fast with the railroad coming through. Growing towns need law." He set the plate in front of her, then took a seat across the table. "Eat," he urged. "Then we can talk about what you need." "What I need?" She echoed, picking up her fork despite herself. The aroma of the food awakened a hunger she hadn't realized she had. "Practical matters," he clarified. "Your ranch, your cattle, winter's coming on, you'll need help." Tabitha stiffened. "I told you I can manage. With respect, Mrs. Sinclair, no one manages a spread this size alone, not even the most capable widow." She wanted to argue, but the truth was, Daniel had employed 2 ranch hands before his illness. They'd left after he died, sensing perhaps that she wouldn't be able to pay them. She'd been avoiding thinking about how she would handle the coming winter alone. "I can't afford help," she admitted after several bites of food. "The medical bills, the funeral." She trailed off, not wanting to elaborate on her financial straits to this stranger. Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "There are men in town looking for honest work. Veterans, mostly, good with cattle. I could send a couple your way." "And how would I pay them? Room and board to start," he suggested. "A share of the spring calves, perhaps. Men like that don't need much, just a purpose and a place to belong." The offer was tempting, but Tabitha's pride balked. "Why would you do this? You don't know me." Isaac's blue eyes met hers steadily. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I've seen too many good people lose everything because help didn't come when it was needed." There was a story there, Tabitha sensed, but she didn't press. Instead, she nodded slowly. "I would be grateful for the introduction, but only if they understand it's temporary until I can sort things out." "Of course," he agreed, rising to his feet. "I'll speak to them tomorrow." "In the meantime, is there anything else you need tonight?" Tabitha shook her head, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. "No, thank you for everything." Isaac replaced his hat, nodding once. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Mrs. Sinclair. Lock your doors tonight." With that, he was gone, leaving Tabitha alone with her thoughts and the lingering warmth of human kindness in the midst of her darkest hour. True to his word, Isaac returned the next day, bringing with him 2 weathered men he introduced as Thomas Whitley and Frederick Dawson. Both were veterans of the recent war, both in their 30s, and both, as Isaac had promised, looking for honest work and little else. "Mrs. Sinclair needs help getting the ranch ready for winter," Isaac explained as the men stood awkwardly in her yard. "There's the herd to bring in closer to the homestead, repairs to be made, firewood to cut. She can offer room in the bunkhouse and meals for now, with the possibility of more come spring." Thomas, the older of the 2 with a salt and pepper beard and missing 2 fingers on his left hand, nodded respectfully. "Madam, we're grateful for the opportunity. Marshal Forrester speaks highly of you." Tabitha glanced at Isaac, surprised. What could he possibly have told them about her? They'd met only yesterday. I told them you're a hard worker who's faced adversity with dignity, Isaac said, as if reading her thoughts, and that anyone who works for you will be treated fairly. That's true, she confirmed, looking back at the men. The work is hard, but I won't ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. That's all we ask, madam, Frederick said. He was younger than Thomas, with a pronounced limp and wary eyes that suggested he'd seen too much in his young life. With the men settled and immediately setting to work assessing the ranch's needs, Tabitha found herself alone with Isaac once more. Thank you, she said simply. They seem like good men. They are, he assured her. They've had their share of troubles, but who hasn't in these times? He hesitated, then added, I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of having Mrs. Holloway organize some of the town's ladies to bring meals for the next week. Give you time to find your footing. Tabitha felt a flash of both gratitude and indignation. You've been busy on my behalf, Marshal. Isaac, he corrected gently. And yes, I have, because I meant what I said yesterday. I'll carry you. The words hung between them, unspoken but remembered. Well, she said, unsure how to respond, it seems I'm in your debt. No debt, he replied firmly, just neighbors helping neighbors. That's how we survive out here. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Isaac would ride out to the ranch every few days, ostensibly to check on Thomas and Frederick, but Tabitha noticed he always seemed to find time to speak with her as well. He'd inquire about her needs, offer suggestions for winterizing the house, sometimes bring small items from town: coffee, sugar, a newspaper. The two ranch hands proved to be as hardworking as promised. Under their care, the cattle were brought in from the far pastures, the barn was repaired, and cords of firewood began to stack up near the house. Tabitha worked alongside them when she could, mending fences, tending to her garden, preserving what vegetables remained before the first frost. In the evenings, she would sit alone in the house, surrounded by memories of Daniel. She'd run her fingers over his things: his favorite chair, his pipe still sitting on the mantel, the book he'd been reading before he fell ill. Sometimes she would talk to him, telling him about her day, about her worries for the future. Sometimes she would simply weep. One particularly cold evening in late October, as the first snowflakes began to fall, there was a knock at her door. Tabitha opened it to find Isaac standing there, his coat dusted with snow, his arms full of packages. Mrs. Sinclair, he greeted her. May I come in? It's getting bitter out here. She stepped aside, surprised by his visit so late in the day. Is everything all right? Just fine, he assured her, stamping his boots on the porch before entering. I was in town when the general store got a shipment in. Thought you might need some supplies. He set the packages on the table. Flour, sugar, coffee, some dried fruit, and this. He pulled out a small book. I noticed you like to read. Thought you might enjoy something new. Tabitha took the book, a collection of poetry by Tennyson. This is very thoughtful, she said, genuinely touched. But I can't accept all this. I can't pay. It's not charity, he interrupted, his expression serious. Consider it an advance on what the town owes you. Your husband was well respected, Mrs. Sinclair. People want to help. She ran her fingers over the book's cover, conflicted. I'm not used to accepting help. I've noticed, he said with a slight smile. Would it help if I said it wasn't just for you? Your hands work better when they're well fed. The town needs this ranch to succeed. Tabitha recognized the explanation for what it was, a way for her to accept help without feeling like an object of pity. She appreciated his understanding. Thank you, she said simply. Would you like some coffee? It's the least I can offer in return. Isaac removed his hat, nodding. I'd appreciate that. As she prepared the coffee, Tabitha was acutely aware of his presence in her home. It had been weeks since Daniel's death, and in that time, Isaac had become a constant in her new life. His visits were something she found herself looking forward to, though she wouldn't admit it aloud. The first snows early this year, he remarked, looking out the window at the thickening flakes. Might be a hard winter. Daniel always said you could predict the winter by how high the squirrels built their nests, she replied, setting a cup before him. This year they're building high. Isaac took a sip of coffee. Smart creatures, squirrels, they prepare. He looked at her directly. Are you prepared, Mrs. Sinclair? Truthfully. The question was unexpected. Tabitha sat across from him, considering her answer. More than I was a month ago, she admitted. Thanks to you. Thanks to your own hard work, he corrected, and the hands, I just made introductions. You did more than that, she said quietly. You showed kindness to a stranger. Something flickered in his eyes, warmth, perhaps, or recognition. Not such a stranger anymore, I hope. The statement hung between them, laden with meaning Tabitha wasn't ready to examine. She looked down at her coffee. No, she agreed softly. Not a stranger. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the wind picking up outside. Eventually, Isaac set down his empty cup. I should go before this gets worse, he said, nodding toward the window where the snow was now falling heavily. Thomas and Frederick know what to do if the storm gets bad. Don't hesitate to call on them if you need anything. Tabitha walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him leave. Be careful on the ride back to town. He paused on the threshold, studying her face for a moment. I've been meaning to ask the hands, say you still go to the cemetery every Sunday. She stiffened slightly. Yes, is that a problem? No, he said gently. Just, it's getting cold. Don't stay too long out there. Daniel wouldn't want you risking your health. The mention of her husband's name on his lips startled her. It was the first time Isaac had referred to Daniel directly. How would you know what he would want? She asked, more sharply than she intended. Isaac didn't take offense. Because any man who loved a woman enough to build all this with her would want her to live, not just survive. He placed his hat on his head, tipping it slightly. Good night, Mrs. Sinclair. As he rode away into the swirling snow, Tabitha stood in the doorway, his words echoing in her mind. Live, not just survive. Was that even possible now? The storm that night was the first of many. Winter descended on Wyoming with a vengeance, bringing freezing temperatures and snow that piled in drifts against the house. Tabitha was grateful for the preparations, the stacked firewood, the repairs to the barn, the cattle brought close to the homestead where they could be fed and monitored. Despite the weather, Isaac continued his visits, though less frequently. Each time he came, he brought news from town, sometimes letters or packages that had arrived for her, occasionally small gifts, a jar of preserves from Mrs. Holloway, a new pair of woolen gloves that someone in town thought might fit her. Tabitha suspected most of these gifts were from Isaac himself, but she accepted them with grace, understanding now that refusing would only hurt him. And somehow, hurting Isaac Forrester had become something she couldn't bear to do. As Christmas approached, the ranch fell into a rhythm. Thomas and Frederick proved invaluable, working tirelessly to keep the cattle fed and the paths cleared. Tabitha found herself with more time to tend to the house, to cook proper meals again, to read by the fire in the evenings. Sometimes when Isaac visited, he would stay for dinner, and they would talk long into the night about books, about the town, about everything except the grief that still lived within her. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a simple meal, Isaac asked her a question he'd never broached before. How did you meet your husband? Tabitha looked up from her mending, surprised. Daniel, we grew up together in Kansas. Our families had neighboring farms. She smiled at the memory. He pulled my braids when we were children. I broke his nose with a rock when we were 12. Isaac laughed, a warm, rich sound that filled the room. Sounds like a solid foundation for marriage. It was, she agreed, her smile turning wistful. We were friends long before we were sweethearts. He knew me better than anyone. She hesitated, then added, when my parents died of fever, his family took me in. We married when I was 22, came out here to start fresh. He was a lucky man, Isaac said quietly. Tabitha looked at him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time. In the firelight, his features were softer, the lines around his eyes less pronounced. He'd become comfortable in her home, his long legs stretched toward the fire, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. There was a small scar near his right wrist that she'd never noticed before. What about you? She asked suddenly. Have you ever been married? A shadow crossed his face. No, never found the right woman at the right time, I suppose. But there was someone, she guessed, sensing there was more to the story. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Yes, he finally said. There was someone a long time ago. He didn't elaborate, and Tabitha didn't press. Everyone had their ghosts in this vast, unforgiving country. I should go, he said after a while, rising to his feet. It's getting late. Tabitha stood as well. You could stay, she offered, then quickly added, we have the spare room, the snow's coming down hard again. Isaac looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. Thank you, but I should get back to town. Never know when the marshal might be needed, even in weather like this. She nodded, understanding but disappointed. As she walked him to the door, he paused, reaching into his coat pocket. I almost forgot, I brought you something. He held out a small package wrapped in brown paper. For Christmas, it's not much, but… Tabitha took it, their fingers brushing in the exchange. I don't have anything for you, she said, flustered. You've given me plenty, he replied cryptically. Open it when you're ready. With that, he was gone into the snowy night, leaving Tabitha standing in the doorway with the package in her hands and a strange fluttering in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold. Tabitha rose early, built up the fire, and prepared a special breakfast for Thomas and Frederick, who would be tending to the cattle before joining her for the midday meal. She had saved some sugar and dried fruit for weeks to make them a proper Christmas pudding, wanting to show her appreciation for their hard work. As she moved around the kitchen, her eyes kept straying to Isaac's gift, still unwrapped on the mantel. She had been waiting for today to open it, a small bright spot to look forward to on what would otherwise be a difficult day, her first Christmas without Daniel. Finally, with breakfast prepared and set to keep warm, she allowed herself to retrieve the package. Sitting in Daniel's chair by the fire, she carefully unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a small wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern of leaves and flowers. It was beautiful craftsmanship, the kind of work that took patience and skill. Inside the box, nestled on a piece of soft cloth, was a silver locket. Simple but elegant, it bore a delicate engraving of a wildflower on its face. Tabitha opened it with trembling fingers to find a small folded note inside rather than the expected photograph, for memories, past and future. Carry them close to your heart, IF. Tears sprang to her eyes, not of grief this time, but of something more complex: gratitude, confusion, warmth. It was a thoughtful gift, personal but not presumptuous. The locket could hold a small image of Daniel, a way to keep him close. But it was the mention of future memories that caught in her throat. As if Isaac believed she would have new memories worth preserving, a future beyond grief. She was still sitting there, the locket in her palm, when a knock came at the door. Wiping her eyes, she rose to answer it, expecting one of the hands. Instead, she found Isaac standing on her porch, his horse stamping in the snow behind him. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Sinclair," he said, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Merry Christmas, Marshal," she replied, automatically stepping back to invite him in. "This is a surprise." "A pleasant one, I hope," he said, removing his hat as he entered. His eyes fell on the open box in her hand. "Ah, you opened it." "Just now," she confirmed. "It's beautiful, Isaac." "Too generous," he shook his head. "Not at all." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Tabitha gestured toward the kitchen. "Would you like some breakfast? I made plenty." "That would be welcome," he admitted. "I've been riding since dawn, on Christmas." She asked, leading the way to the kitchen. "No day of rest for the marshal. I had some deliveries to make," he explained. "Presents for some of the children in the outlying homesteads. The storm kept their parents from coming to town for supplies." Tabitha paused in the act of serving him, struck by this revelation. "You rode all that way to deliver Christmas gifts to children you barely know?" Isaac shrugged, seeming embarrassed. "Children should have something to open on Christmas morning." In that moment, looking at this man who had shown nothing but kindness since the day they met, Tabitha felt something shift inside her. A door that had been firmly closed since Daniel's death opened just a crack, allowing in a sliver of light. "You're a good man, Isaac Forrester," she said softly. His eyes met hers, steady and blue as a summer sky. "I try to be." They ate breakfast together, talking of simple things: the weather, the cattle, the Christmas services planned in town for later that day. When they had finished, Isaac helped her clear the dishes, their movements around the small kitchen falling into an easy rhythm, as if they had done this many times before. "I have something for you as well," Tabitha said suddenly, making a decision. "Wait here." She hurried to her bedroom, returning with a knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "I've been working on this in the evenings," she explained, holding it out to him. "I wasn't sure who it was for until now." Isaac took the scarf, running his fingers over the intricate pattern. "You made this." She nodded. "My mother taught me to knit when I was a girl. I find it soothing." "It's fine work," he said, wrapping it around his neck. "And warm, thank you, Tabitha." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. "You're welcome," she replied, then added hesitantly, Would you like to stay for Christmas dinner? Thomas and Frederick will be joining me, and there's plenty." Something like joy flickered across his face. "I'd be honored." That Christmas day marked a turning point. In the weeks that followed, as winter maintained its grip on the land, Isaac's visits became more frequent, more personal. He no longer made excuses about checking on the hands or bringing supplies. He came to see her, to spend time with her, and they both acknowledged it in unspoken ways. They would read together by the fire, discuss books and ideas, share stories of their lives before Wyoming. Isaac told her of his time in the cavalry, of the battles he'd seen, of his decision to become a lawman afterward, seeking order in a chaotic world. He spoke of his childhood in Pennsylvania, of his father who had been a blacksmith and his mother who had taught in a small school. But there remained parts of his past. He didn't speak of the woman he had once loved, the years between the cavalry and becoming a marshal. Tabitha sensed these were wounds not yet healed, and she respected his silence, just as he respected hers when memories of Daniel became too painful to share. January gave way to February, bringing bitter cold but also lengthening days that promised spring would eventually return. The cattle were weathering the winter well under Thomas and Frederick's care, and Tabitha began to believe the ranch might survive after all. One evening in late February, as a particularly fierce blizzard howled outside, Tabitha sat with Isaac at the kitchen table, a lamp burning low between them. They had been playing chess, a game Isaac had taught her over several visits. She was improving, though still no match for his strategic mind. "Checkmate," he announced, moving his bishop into position. "But you're getting better." "That was the longest game yet," Tabitha laughed, shaking her head. "You're a patient teacher, and you're a quick learner." He began to reset the pieces, his fingers moving deftly over the board. "Another game," she glanced toward the window where snow pelted against the glass. "You won't be riding back to town in this." It wasn't a question, but Isaac answered anyway. "No, not tonight. I'll sleep in the bunkhouse with Thomas and Frederick if that's all right." "Of course," she said automatically, though part of her wanted to offer the spare room again. But that would be improper. A widow living alone inviting a man to stay under her roof. People would talk, and in a small town like Clearwater, talk could be damaging. As if reading her thoughts, Isaac said gently, "I wouldn't want to compromise your reputation, Tabitha." She met his gaze across the table. "I know." Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the growing closeness that neither was ready to name. Tabitha looked away first, her heart beating a little faster than normal. "Another game, then," she agreed, focusing on the chess pieces. They played until the lamp began to sputter, signaling it was running low on oil. Outside, the storm showed no signs of abating. "I should let you get some rest," Isaac said, rising from the table. "Thank you for the evening." Tabitha walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him go, even if only to the bunkhouse a short distance away. At the threshold, he turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. "Tabitha," he began, then stopped, seeming to search for words. "I want you to know that I value our friendship greatly." "As do I," she replied softly. He nodded, still looking as if there was more he wanted to say. Instead, he reached out and gently touched the locket that now hung around her neck. "You're wearing it?" "Every day," she admitted. The locket contained a small photograph of Daniel on one side, the other side still empty. Isaac's fingers brushed against her collarbone as he withdrew his hand, the brief contact sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Good night, Tabitha," he said, his voice low. "Good night, Isaac." After he left, Tabitha stood at the window, watching his figure move through the swirling snow toward the bunkhouse. She pressed her hand to the locket, feeling the steady beat of her heart beneath it. For the first time since Daniel's death, she allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was developing feelings for Isaac Forrester. The realization brought both joy and guilt. Joy because Isaac was a good man, kind and honorable, someone who had shown her nothing but respect and care. Guilt because it felt like a betrayal of Daniel's memory, as if by opening her heart to someone new, she was somehow loving him less. She went to bed troubled, her dreams a confused mix of past and present, of Daniel's face and Isaac's voice. When she woke the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow, pristine and silent. From her window, she could see Isaac helping Thomas and Frederick clear paths to the barn. He worked alongside them, his breath fogging in the cold air, his movements strong and sure. The blue scarf she had made him was wrapped around his neck, a splash of color against the white landscape. Watching him, Tabitha made a decision. She would honor Daniel's memory by living fully as Isaac had once suggested, not just surviving but living. What that meant for her feelings toward Isaac she wasn't yet sure, but she would no longer deny them, nor feel guilty for experiencing them. As winter gradually loosened its grip on the land, signs of spring began to appear, patches of grass emerging from melting snow, the first tentative birdsong, longer days filled with strengthening sunlight. With the changing season came changes to the ranch as well. The first calves were born in early March, healthy and strong, promising a good year for the herd. Tabitha spent long hours in the barn with Thomas and Frederick, helping with difficult births, bottle feeding the occasional orphaned calf. It was exhausting work, but deeply satisfying to see life renewing itself all around her. Isaac continued his visits, now often bringing supplies for the newborn calves or medicines for those that struggled. He would roll up his sleeves and work alongside them, showing a surprising knowledge of cattle ranching for a town marshal. "Where did you learn so much about cattle?" Tabitha asked him one afternoon as they walked together checking on the new mothers and their calves. "I worked on a ranch in Colorado for a few years," he replied. "Between the cavalry and becoming a marshal, needed to clear my head, figure out what I wanted to do with my life." It was the first time he had volunteered information about that mysterious period in his past. Tabitha glanced at him, noting the relaxed set of his shoulders, the ease with which he moved among the cattle. "You were good at it," she observed. He smiled slightly. "I was, but it wasn't where I belonged." "And where do you belong, Isaac Forrester?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, more pointed than she had intended. He stopped walking, turning to face her. The afternoon sun caught in his hair, highlighting strands of gold among the brown. "I'm still figuring that out," he said quietly. "But I'm getting closer to an answer every day." His gaze held hers, and Tabitha felt her cheeks warm in a way that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. Before she could respond, one of the calves stumbled over to them, butting its head against Isaac's leg. The moment broke as he knelt to scratch the animal's ears. "This one's going to be trouble," he chuckled, too curious for his own good. Tabitha watched him with the calf, his large hands gentle on the small creature. "He likes you." "Smart animal," Isaac replied with a wink that set her heart fluttering. As they continued their rounds, Tabitha found herself wondering what it would be like if Isaac were here permanently, not just as a visitor but as a part of the ranch, a part of her life. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. That evening, after Isaac had returned to town, Thomas approached her as she was finishing her chores in the barn. "Mrs. Sinclair," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "Frederick and I have been meaning to speak with you about something." Tabitha set down the bucket she was carrying, giving him her full attention. "What is it, Thomas?" The older man removed his hat, turning it in his weathered hands. "It's about our arrangement. Spring's here now, and we've been thinking about what comes next." A flash of panic went through her. Were they planning to leave? She couldn't manage the ranch alone, not with all the new calves and the work of planting season ahead. "I see," she said carefully. "Are you unhappy here?" "No, madam," he assured her quickly. "Quite the opposite, Frederick and I." "Well, we've come to consider this place home, in a way. We were wondering if you might consider a more permanent arrangement." Relief flooded through her. "What did you have in mind?" "We thought perhaps a partnership of sorts," Thomas explained. "We continue working the ranch, helping it grow. Instead of wages, we take a percentage of the profits. We all share in the good years and the lean ones." It was a fair proposal, one that would benefit all of them. The men would have stability and a stake in their work, and she would have the help she needed without the pressure of regular wages she couldn't always guarantee. "I think that's an excellent idea," she told him, smiling genuinely. "We can work out the details together." Thomas's face relaxed into a rare smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair, we won't let you down." "I know you won't," she replied. "And Thomas, I think it's time you and Frederick started calling me Tabitha." As April brought warmer days and fields of wildflowers, Tabitha felt herself coming back to life along with the land. The crushing grief that had defined her existence since Daniel's death had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something she could carry without being broken by it. She still visited his grave every Sunday, but now she would tell him about the ranch, about the calves, about her plans for the future, a future she could finally imagine. She didn't tell him about Isaac, though. That remained a confusion she kept to herself, unsure what Daniel would think of the feelings growing in her heart for another man. Isaac, for his part, seemed content with their friendship, never pushing for more, though Tabitha sometimes caught him looking at her with an expression that suggested he wanted to. There were moments a hand lingering on hers as he helped her down from a horse, a shared laugh that left them standing closer than strictly necessary. A glance held a beat too long that hinted at deeper feelings. But always, respectfully, he maintained a certain distance, as if waiting for her to decide when or if that distance should close. The opportunity came unexpectedly in late April. Tabitha had ridden into town for supplies, something she did more frequently now that the ranch was running smoothly under the partnership with Thomas and Frederick. She enjoyed these trips, the chance to speak with other women, to hear news, to feel connected to the community. She was leaving the general store, her purchases loaded in her saddlebags, when she heard raised voices from the direction of the marshal's office. Curious, she walked toward the sound, rounding the corner just in time to see Isaac facing off with a man she didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with a cruel twist to his mouth and hands hovering near the guns at his hips. "I'm telling you for the last time, Wilson," Isaac was saying, his voice calm but his stance alert. "Ride on out of Clearwater, we don't want your kind here." The man Wilson spat on the ground between them. "And I'm telling you, Forrester, you don't get to decide where I go. This is a free country." "Not free for men who rob stagecoaches and shoot drivers," Isaac replied evenly. "I know it was you and your gang who hit the Cheyenne line last month. 2 men died." Wilson's face hardened. "You can't prove a thing." "Maybe not yet," Isaac conceded, "but I will. In the meantime, this is my town and I'm asking you politely to leave it." Wilson laughed, an ugly sound. "Your town? You've been here, what, 6 months, playing the hero for these simple folk?" His eyes narrowed. "Word is you're sweet on the Sinclair widow, that true?" "You warming her bed yet, Marshal?" Tabitha gasped audibly, drawing both men's attention. Isaac's expression flickered from surprise to concern when he saw her. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said formally, "please go back to the store. This doesn't concern you." But Wilson had already turned toward her, his gaze raking over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "So this is the famous widow," he drawled. "Pretty little thing. I can see why you're keeping her to yourself, Forrester." Isaac's hand dropped to his gun. "That's enough, Wilson. You're leaving." Now, the change in Isaac was startling. The gentle man Tabitha knew had vanished, replaced by someone harder, dangerous. His eyes had gone cold, his body coiled with tension. Wilson must have sensed the shift too, for he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy, Marshal, I'm going." He backed toward his horse, never taking his eyes off Isaac. "But I'll be seeing you again. Count on it." As Wilson mounted and rode away, Isaac's posture remained rigid until the man was out of sight. Only then did he turn to Tabitha, the hardness in his eyes softening as he looked at her. "Are you all right?" he asked, closing the distance between them. "I'm fine," she assured him. "Who was that man?" Isaac's jaw tightened. "Jacob Wilson, outlaw, murderer, all-around piece of human garbage. I've been tracking him and his gang for years." "Years?" Tabitha echoed, confused. "I thought you'd only been a marshal for 4 years. A shadow crossed his face. "It's complicated. Let's get you somewhere private to talk." He led her to his office, a small but tidy space with a desk, a few chairs, and a cell in the back. Once inside, he closed the door and gestured for her to sit. "What he said about us," Isaac began, pacing slightly. "I want you to know I've never spoken disrespectfully about you to anyone. Your reputation is safe." "I know that," Tabitha said softly. "That's not what concerns me. It's what you said, that you've been tracking this man for years." "What did you mean?" Isaac stopped pacing, his back to her for a long moment. When he turned, his expression was resolved, as if he'd made a difficult decision. "Remember I told you there was someone a long time ago?" He asked quietly. Tabitha nodded, her heart suddenly beating faster. "Her name was Emily," Isaac said, the words coming with difficulty. "We were to be married. She was everything to me." He took a deep breath. "Wilson and his gang robbed the bank in our town. Emily was there making a deposit for her father's business. When the teller tried to sound the alarm, Wilson shot him. Then he shot Emily when she screamed." Tabitha's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Isaac, I was a deputy then," he continued, his voice flat. "I arrived just as they were riding out, too late to stop them, too late to save her. She died in my arms." The pain in his eyes was raw, even after all these years. Tabitha rose from her chair, moving to stand before him. "That's why you became a marshal," she said softly, "to find him." Isaac nodded. "I've been following his trail for 7 years. He's clever, always one step ahead. I tracked him to Colorado, then here to Wyoming. When I heard Clearwater needed a marshal, it seemed like fate. He'd been seen in the area." "Does the town know about your history with Wilson?" "No," he admitted. "I didn't want them to think I was using the position just to settle a personal score. I am a real marshal, Tabitha. I take my duties seriously, but yes, finding Wilson has always been part of it." Tabitha reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I understand wanting justice for someone you loved." Isaac looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. "I've never told anyone that story, not since it happened." "Why tell me now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I don't want there to be secrets between us," he replied simply. "Because you deserve to know who I am, all of me, and because—" He trailed off, but his eyes said what his words didn't. "Because I'm falling in love with you." Tabitha felt it then, the last walls around her heart crumbling. Without thinking, she stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. Isaac remained perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might break the moment. "Tabitha," he murmured, her name a question and a plea. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his, a gentle, tentative kiss that nonetheless set her heart racing. For a moment, Isaac didn't respond, and she feared she had misread everything. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close as he returned the kiss with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he confessed, "but I didn't want to rush you. Didn't want you to think I was taking advantage of your grief." "You've been nothing but respectful," she assured him. "Too respectful sometimes. I've been waiting for you to make a move for weeks." He laughed softly, the sound rumbling through his chest. "And here I thought I was being so careful not to pressure you. Maybe we've both been too careful," she suggested, looking up at him. "Life is short, Isaac. I know that better than most." His expression sobered. "Yes, it is." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "What happens now?" It was a loaded question. They both knew that a relationship between them would raise eyebrows in town. A widow courting so soon after her husband's death, especially with the town marshal, would be fodder for gossip. "Now," Tabitha said slowly, "we take our time, get to know each other properly. No more holding back." Isaac nodded, relief evident in his features. "I can do that." He hesitated, then added, "But Wilson being here complicates things. He's dangerous, Tabitha. Now that he's seen you, knows you're important to me." "I'm not afraid," she told him, though the lie was transparent. "You should be," he said grimly. "I am. I've lost someone I loved to that man before. I couldn't bear it if—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Tabitha understood the fear that gripped him, the same fear she had lived with during Daniel's illness, the terror of losing someone precious. "What will you do?" she asked. "My job," he answered simply. "Find him, bring him to justice, but until then I want you to be careful. Don't ride into town alone. Keep Thomas and Frederick close." She wanted to argue, to assert her independence, but the haunted look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't about her capabilities, it was about his fear born of terrible experience. "All right," she agreed, "I'll be careful." Relief washed over his face. He pulled her close again, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you." As Tabitha rode home later that day, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: joy at the new understanding between her and Isaac, worry about the threat Wilson posed, uncertainty about how to navigate this unexpected turn in her life. But beneath it all was a sense of rightness, as if pieces long scattered were finally coming together. The ranch came into view as she crested the final hill, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Thomas was in the corral working with one of the horses, while Frederick repaired a section of fence nearby. It was a peaceful scene, one that had become familiar and dear to her over the past months. But as she drew closer, Tabitha noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. The front door of the house stood open, swinging slightly in the breeze. She was certain she had closed and latched it before leaving that morning. Slowing her horse, she approached cautiously, scanning the yard for any sign of intruders. Everything else seemed normal. The chickens pecked at the ground near the coop. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney where the hands likely had a fire going to cook their evening meal. Still, the open door nagged at her. She stopped at the hitching post, deliberating whether to call Thomas and Frederick or investigate herself. Isaac's warning echoed in her mind, but it seemed foolish to raise an alarm over what might be nothing more than a door she had forgotten to secure properly. Decision made, she dismounted and approached the house, moving quietly up the porch steps. From the threshold, she could see into the main room. Nothing appeared disturbed. Her books still sat in neat rows on the shelves. Daniel's chair remained in its place by the fireplace. Her mending basket sat undisturbed on the side table. Relaxing slightly, Tabitha stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind her. Perhaps the latch had simply failed to catch, and the wind had blown it open. She moved further into the house, checking each room systematically. It wasn't until she reached her bedroom that she realized something was wrong. The small jewelry box where she kept her few precious items, her mother's wedding ring, a cameo that had been her grandmother's, a silver hairpin Daniel had given her for their first anniversary, sat open on the dresser. Its contents spilled across the surface. Heart pounding, Tabitha quickly checked the hiding place beneath the floorboard where she kept the ranch's money. To her relief, it appeared untouched. Whoever had been in her home hadn't been looking for cash. She returned to the dresser, sorting through the scattered jewelry. Everything seemed to be there except her hands flew to her throat. The locket, Isaac's locket that she wore every day, was missing. She had removed it that morning while bathing and had forgotten to put it back on before leaving for town. A wave of nausea swept through her as realization dawned. This wasn't a random break-in. Someone had taken the locket, specifically the one item that connected her to Isaac, Wilson. It had to be. Somehow he had followed her from town, or perhaps guessed where she lived based on her name. He had taken the locket as a message to Isaac, a way of saying, "I know what matters to you." Tabitha rushed from the house, calling for Thomas and Frederick. The men came running at the urgency in her voice, concern evident on their weathered faces. "Someone's been in the house," she explained quickly. "They took something of mine, a locket. I think it might have been the man Marshal Forrester confronted in town today." Thomas's expression darkened. "I'll saddle up, ride to town to warn the marshal." "No," Tabitha said firmly. "We stay together. It'll be dark soon. If this man is as dangerous as Isaac says, I don't want any of us alone out there." Frederick nodded his agreement. "We'll secure the house, take turns keeping watch tonight. Tomorrow at first light, I'll go to town." "I've got my old service rifle in the bunkhouse," Thomas added. "I'll fetch it." As the men moved to implement their plan, Tabitha returned to the house, her mind racing. The violation of her home, her sanctuary, left her feeling exposed and vulnerable, but beneath the fear was a current of anger. This man, this Wilson, thought to intimidate her, to use her as a pawn in his vendetta against Isaac. She would not be a pawn. She had not survived losing Daniel, had not rebuilt her life from the ashes of grief, only to cower in fear now. If Wilson thought to find a helpless widow, he would be sorely disappointed. The night passed tensely but without incident. Tabitha slept little, startling at every creak of the house settling, every whisper of wind against the windows. At dawn, Frederick set out for town while Thomas remained at the ranch, rifle at the ready as he helped Tabitha with the morning chores. Mid-morning brought the sound of approaching horses. Tabitha and Thomas exchanged glances, both reaching for weapons, Thomas his rifle, Tabitha the shotgun she kept for protection. They needn't have worried. It was Isaac and Frederick, along with two other men Tabitha recognized from town volunteers from the hastily formed posse. Frederick explained as they dismounted. Isaac came to her immediately, his face taut with concern. "Are you all right?" Frederick told me what happened. "I'm fine," she assured him. "Nothing was taken but the locket." Isaac's expression hardened. "It's Wilson sending a message, making it personal." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I should have known he'd come after you." "You couldn't have known," Tabitha said firmly, "and I won't be intimidated in my own home." Isaac looked at her admiringly despite his worry. "You're braver than most men I know." Tabitha Sinclair. "Not brave," she corrected, "just stubborn." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That too." He sobered quickly. "We found tracks leading away from your property, heading north toward the mountains. Wilson and his gang are likely holed up somewhere in that terrain." "What are you going to do?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Go after them," he replied simply. "End this once and for all." Fear clutched at Tabitha's heart. "How many men does he have with him?" "3, from what we can tell." "And you have 4, including yourself," she calculated, looking at the small posse. 5, Thomas corrected, stepping forward. "I'm coming too." "No," Tabitha protested. "I need you here." The older man shook his head. "Frederick can handle things for a few days, and with respect, Mrs. Sinclair, Tabitha, I wasn't always a ranch hand. I know how to track, and I know how to fight." Isaac studied Thomas thoughtfully. "Army." "7th Cavalry," Thomas confirmed. 8 years. A look of understanding passed between the two men. Isaac nodded once. "We'd be glad to have you." Tabitha wanted to argue further, but she recognized the determination in both men's faces. Instead, she turned to Frederick. "You'll stay." "I'll guard this place with my life," he promised solemnly. While the men prepared for their pursuit, gathering supplies and checking weapons, Tabitha pulled Isaac aside. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Don't let your need for justice make you reckless." Isaac took her hands in his. "I promise, but I need to do this, Tabitha, not just for Emily anymore, but for you, for us. As long as Wilson is out there, neither of us will ever truly be safe." She knew he was right. This confrontation had been 7 years in the making, a reckoning that could not be avoided. Still, fear gripped her at the thought of losing him now, just as they were beginning to find their way to each other. "Come back to me," she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him briefly. "I will," he vowed against her lips. "That's a promise I intend to keep." The posse rode out an hour later, a small band of determined men following the trail of a killer. Tabitha watched them until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned back to the ranch. There was work to be done, and worry would not make the time pass any faster. 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. Tabitha threw herself into ranch work, helping Frederick with tasks that would normally have been shared among all 3 of them. They spoke little, both too preoccupied with thoughts of the men who had ridden out. On the morning of the 4th day, as Tabitha was gathering eggs from the chicken coop, she heard the sound of horses approaching. Her heart leaped into her throat as she hurried to the yard, Frederick emerging from the barn at the same moment. 4 riders appeared over the ridge, one less than had departed. As they drew closer, Tabitha scanned their faces anxiously, relief flooding through her when she spotted Isaac among them. He rode at the front, his posture weary but upright. Beside him was Thomas, a bandage visible on his arm but otherwise appearing unharmed. The other 2 men from town followed, one of them leading a horse with a body draped over the saddle, a body wrapped in a blanket and secured with ropes. Tabitha ran to meet them as they entered the yard, her eyes fixed on Isaac. He dismounted stiffly, wincing slightly, and she noticed for the first time the dark stain on his shirt beneath his vest. "You're hurt," she said, reaching for him. "It's nothing," he assured her, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "Just a graze." Wilson, she asked, glancing at the shrouded body. Isaac nodded grimly. It's over. The simple statement contained multitudes' relief, justice, closure, but also a weight that Tabitha suspected would never fully lift from his shoulders. 7 years of pursuit of carrying grief and rage had come to an end. The others, she asked, noting they were still one rider short. One got away, Thomas explained, dismounting carefully to avoid jarring his injured arm. Jim Barton took a bullet in the shoulder. We left him in town with the doctor before coming here. And Wilson's other men, one dead, Isaac replied flatly. One headed for the territorial prison to stand trial. There would be more to the story. Tabitha knew details of the confrontation, of how Wilson had met his end, of the wounds both visible and invisible that the men had brought back with them. But those could wait. For now, what mattered was that they had returned, that Isaac had kept his promise. Let's get you inside, she said, slipping an arm around his waist to support him. That nothing needs tending. Isaac didn't argue, allowing her to lead him toward the house while the others took charge of the horses and Wilson's body. Inside, Tabitha helped him to a chair and carefully removed his vest and shirt, revealing a bloody furrow along his ribs where a bullet had grazed him. This needs stitching, she said, examining the wound with gentle fingers. I've had worse, he replied, watching her face as she worked. That doesn't make me feel better, she retorted, gathering supplies to clean and dress the injury. As she worked, Isaac reached into his pocket with his good arm, pulling out a familiar silver chain. I believe this belongs to you. Tabitha paused, staring at the locket dangling from his fingers. You found it. Wilson had it on him, Isaac explained, like a trophy. She took it from him, feeling its weight in her palm heavier now with the history it carried. Thank you. Open it, he suggested, softly curious. Tabitha did as he asked. Inside, where the second compartment had been empty, was a tiny photograph of Isaac, looking serious and formal in what appeared to be his marshal's uniform. I had it taken in town before we left, he explained. Asked the photographer to make it small enough to fit, I thought. Well, I thought it was time for new memories, like the note said. Tears sprang to Tabitha's eyes. Even in the midst of pursuing Wilson with danger ahead, Isaac had taken the time to do this for her, to make a gesture that acknowledged both her past and their possible future. It's perfect, she whispered, closing the locket and slipping it around her neck where it belonged. She finished tending his wound in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When she was done, Isaac caught her hand, holding it against his chest. I've been thinking, he said, his voice low, about what comes next. Tabitha's heart quickened. And what have you decided? That I'm tired of chasing ghosts, he replied simply. That maybe it's time to put down roots somewhere, build something that lasts. Here. She asked, hardly daring to hope. Isaac nodded slowly. If that's something you might want, I know it's soon, Tabitha. I know you're still healing, but I love you. I think I've loved you since that day at the cemetery when you fell to your knees in the mud and I promised to carry you. The words, spoken so plainly and with such conviction, brought fresh tears to her eyes. I love you too, she admitted. And it terrifies me. I wasn't looking for this, wasn't ready. I know, he said gently. We can take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Tabitha looked at him, this man who had come into her life when she was at her lowest, who had helped her stand again, who had shown her that life could still hold joy and promise after devastating loss. She thought of Daniel, of what he would want for her. Not endless grief, surely. Not a half-lived life. I don't need much time, she decided. Just, let's do this properly. Courting, I mean. Let the town get used to the idea. Let me get used to the idea. Isaac's face broke into a smile that transformed his features, erasing years of hardship in an instant. I can court you proper, Tabitha Sinclair. I've been practicing in my head for months. She laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. Have you now? Oh yes, he assured her, his eyes twinkling. I've got plans, picnics by the creek, evenings reading poetry by the fire. Maybe even a dance or two in town when my ribs heal up. That sounds wonderful, she said softly, and it did. Not because the activities themselves were extraordinary, but because they represented something Tabitha had thought lost forever, a future filled with ordinary joys, with companionship, With love, in the months that followed, Isaac kept his word. Their courtship progressed with a proper decorum that nevertheless couldn't disguise the depth of feeling between them. Isaac resigned his position as marshal, passing the badge to a capable deputy who had served under him. He moved into the bunkhouse with Thomas and Frederick, helping with the ranch while building a small cabin of his own on the property, a place, he explained, that would be theirs when the time was right. The town watched with interest as the widow Sinclair and the former marshal grew closer, but any gossip was tempered by respect for both parties and recognition of their shared hardships. They had each lost someone they loved, had each rebuilt their lives from tragedy. If they had found happiness together, who could begrudge them that, by autumn, Isaac's cabin was complete, a simple but sturdy structure nestled among the trees near the main house. On a crisp October evening, as the leaves turned gold and red around them, he asked Tabitha to become his wife. They were married in November, a small ceremony in the town church followed by a celebration at the ranch. Daniel's memory was honored, not forgotten. His photograph remained in Tabitha's locket alongside Isaac's, a recognition that love doesn't erase what came before but builds upon it, creating something new and equally precious. Isaac understood this better than most, carrying his own memories of Emily with respect rather than with the consuming grief that had once driven him. Life on the ranch continued, seasons turning one into another. The partnership with Thomas and Frederick flourished, the herd grew, and the Sinclair Forrester Ranch became known as one of the most successful in the territory. Isaac proved to be as skilled at ranching as he had been at law enforcement, his steady leadership and strategic mind valuable assets in the challenging business. In the spring following their wedding, Tabitha discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought joy beyond measure to both of them, a new life representing hope and future in the most tangible form. Their daughter was born on a January morning as snow fell gently outside Emily Danielle Forrester, named for those they had loved and lost. As Isaac held his newborn daughter in his arms, his face alight with wonder, Tabitha watched from her bed, heart full to bursting. "I never thought I'd have this," Isaac confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "A family, a home. Neither did I," Tabitha admitted, "not after Daniel died. I thought that part of my life was over." Isaac sat carefully beside her on the bed, cradling their daughter between them. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For falling to your knees that day," he replied, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "For letting me carry you when you couldn't stand, for carrying me when I needed it too." Tabitha reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that happiness had softened. "We carry each other," she corrected gently. "That's what love is." As their daughter slept peacefully between them, wrapped in the blanket Tabitha had knitted during the long evenings of her pregnancy, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other in the midst of grief and built something beautiful from the ashes. Outside, the Wyoming winter continued, harsh and unforgiving as it had always been. But within the walls of their home, warmth and love prevailed, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and its endless capacity to begin again.